Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Jennifer Wilson, and I'm here with my good friend, Amy Vetter, and we're here to talk about leadership in the profession and in the world and in our lives, which we do every Friday at lunchtime. And today, Amy and I were thinking April 9th. Gosh, in our profession, there are a lot of people who are really trying to push to an April 15th close, even though the deadline moved to May 15th. And those that aren't tax people have all sorts of reports due, and they're deep into audits, and they're getting financials out, and delivering consulting and advisory engagements. Lots of people calculating employee retention credits and all kinds of other stuff happening. And so, but what we're hearing is kind of a little bit of like, poor me, or my mom calls it playing the game of ain't it awful. Let's make a list of all the stuff awful in our lives. And I think I've been encountering people this last couple weeks. There are things that aren't working right. And boy, I think we spend a lot of time in this session, and I know I do a lot, and you do too, Amy, outside of our little video streaming, talking about what's wrong, what's broken, what we need to fix, how to break the business model. But that's not what today's session is about. Amy and I decided that today we needed to talk about what's not broken, what's good, what's working, what's positive, and maybe what are some of the cool things coming out of this pandemic that we should be preserving, looking forward to. So I think we're going to try to call all of us listening to this to a more positive, grateful gratitude practice for this next little bit. And so that's what we thought we'd do today on this fine Friday. So Amy, do you want to start?
Sure. So when we talk about gratitude, the reason that it becomes so important is that our brains are tuned in to be negative. So that's our natural state. So when we have negative thoughts or feelings about anything, the one thing that is good to understand is there's nothing wrong with you by having those thoughts. It's kind of what our natural state is. But what we have to do is train our brains so that we can feel better from an internal place, that we're not waiting for the outside to make us feel better. And a lot of the negativity or thoughts that people have is usually blame for the outside or blame for our circumstances. So these are the times that it's really good to actually get grounded in the things that you are grateful for so that you can cultivate the feeling that you want to have rather than allowing the day to control you or the outside circumstances to control how you feel. And so a practice that you can do with this is that you try to find 5 things in a day that you appreciate or are grateful for. And it could be as simple as, like, today I got to go on a run and it was sunny and it just felt good to be outside again. It doesn't have to be major accomplishments. It's just things that fill your cup, right? And it could be just the littlest things. It could be that someone smiled at you today, or a meeting went better than it usually does. It doesn't have to be these major things. But what happens is if we create a practice of gratitude at the end of the day to say, what were the 5 things that I'm grateful for at the end of the day, it helps train our brain to look for the good rather than to go to its natural state of the negative. And that can be a helpful way to just really get started with this. And if you can't do 5 things, start with 1 and then add 2, add 3, as you go on. It's just like any exercise. It's an exercise with your brain to start thinking a little bit differently and just observe from a different perspective.
I love it. Yeah, and I love gratitude, and I think the evening or first thing in the morning either works. For me, sometimes it works for me to try to get present to gratitude when I'm running. Like I went for a run this morning too, really early, and I pray often on my run, but I also try to, part of my prayer, in addition to asking for help for myself and others, is I pray gratitude, blessings or whatever. And like today, driving back from my run, because I went and met a friend, one of the things I was like really present to was all the budding trees here in Nebraska, the flowering trees, the red bud and the snowball trees and the magnolia trees are all in full bloom. And it's amazing. It's like this, I don't know, fireworks of color that's happened all of a sudden against a very dark and gloomy landscape that we had gray, brown for, a long time. So anyway, that's something that I do. I usually get in touch with gratitude in the morning, and either works. Another thing, Amy, for us to talk about at some point, or just to tag on here, is the idea of possibilities. And gratitude is, I'm just grateful for this. And you said it could be any little thing. Sometimes when I talk about gratitude, I talk about things like, I love spicy food, so like I will grow some really spicy peppers and be amazed by, having daily gratitude of how spicy my homegrown peppers are. I know it's ridiculous. Some of the stuff that I can focus on, or coffee. I love coffee, so sometimes I'll just, you might take for granted that cup of coffee that you brewed, and it's not that hard to brew it, right? But sometimes I'll take a drink of my coffee and think, oh my God, I am so grateful for coffee. So it's just, whatever it is, it has you stop focusing on, here's all the stuff I need to do right now, or here's all the stuff that's not working right, or here's all the stuff I'm irritated by. And I think it just creates a better ecosystem for you physically, mentally, and I think it helps you not get as hooked later when things don't go well. But possibilities are about like, here's what I'm excited for. So like today I said to my husband, I can feel like I'm maybe 2 or 3 weeks away from putting paddle boards in the water. You know what I mean? So now I'm like, oh, I feel paddle boards are coming. So I try to like have things that are little and big that I'm excited for. I'm going to see you, Amy, in person in July. And we're going to do a session together. And we've been doing this 15 months or so, and we haven't been physically together the whole time. And I can't wait.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the relationship that we have forged through this process is amazing. But we haven't been physically together. And I don't know the last time we were physically together.
Hawaii.
And it could have been, Hawaii, yes, when we did. Well, so that's like 2 Octobers ago. Yeah, 2 Octobers ago. So if you think about that, I try to put out there these cool future milestones that aren't that far away. I'm, like someday I'll retire or something. I don't want to do that. I want to think about like 2 weeks from now, 90 days from now. And that helps me sometimes when I have to put my head down and really push through some hard stuff. I can think about the cool stuff or fun stuff that's coming.
Yeah. And I think also a possibility, if we can step back from what we've gone through during, the last 15 months or whatever that is, think of how much innovation has happened. And hi, Grace.
Yeah, she was with us last time.
You were with
2 Octobers ago. Yeah, and it was because of Grace that we were together. So thank you, Grace. Thank you. I can't wait to see Grace, by the way. I might see her in July also. I don't know if I'm going to get to see her in New Orleans, but maybe.
Yeah. So, but the possibility of the fact that we've gone through a lot of change and it's been hard, but through that change, there's been just some amazing innovation that's happened, and things that maybe you wanted to do for a long time that you never did. I know I'm going through a lot of that in my own business, and I know you too, Jen. I mean, so one is what we've been able to do to collaborate together because of this, but there has been programs that I haven't put together because of not having the time or just knowing it was going to be a lot of work. So that this has really kind of lit a fire under me to deliver new services, new programs that I, have wanted to do. It's not for the lack of wanting to do it. And it's given me the space to actually create. And I know for so many firms that I'm working with, the kind of innovation that's happening and new ways of working wouldn't have happened had this not happened. So, I think the hard parts are short term, right? Like, as far as eventually they will come to an end when, and it already feels like life is kind of getting back to normal.
Yes.
But it's coming back. We're working in new ways and they're acceptable finally. I mean, how long have we talked about you don't have to be in an office to show production, and you don't have to be doing time and billing. It can be project driven and on people's time that it makes sense. And it's working. Everyone's seeing it's working. So those are big things to be, have gratitude, but also look at the possibility of where things could go now that there's been a shift in thinking because there was no choice. You had to do it to get through this time period.
Right. Well, and, I know that there, obviously you went right to remote work as one of the blessings, or flexible blended work, or whatever you want to call it. And I agree. I've definitely been talking about it and doing it for decades. And some firms were, right there with me and with us. Others were not. And nobody was as far as I wanted them to be. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they'll stay this far, but I know that we'll have a whole new way of trusting that people working from somewhere else are working and that they can be productive. I think that that's just been proven. It's completely proven and very difficult to argue. I think that a lot of talent that haven't been happy in the firms they were in because their firms didn't get it, weren't progressive, not just on remote, but other things. Maybe weren't client sent, like client service focused, or weren't going to implement technology to make things more automated, or weren't going to focus as much on advisory, or didn't want a niche or whatever. And they felt like, gosh, my firm doesn't get it. And they felt sort of locked up because maybe their firm was the firm in town. They now know, hey man, this works. I can be productive. I can serve clients. I can manage a team. I can work for any firm in the country. I don't have to stay in this position that I wasn't totally thrilled with. And I love that for the talent out there. I mean, I love the options that have just opened up to them. They don't have to settle. And I love for firms the options for talent and hiring that have opened up. Because those that do get it, that are progressive, that are trusting cultures, generous cultures that are going to figure out how to make it all blend and work. Combinations of in-person and remote and flexible. They're going to have a lot of options, those firms, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah. And I think another area that I am so pleased to see is the mental health area in firms of taking notice that people need the time to not burn out, to do the things that they need to do to re-energize and refuel. I never thought I would get to this point in my career where I was talking to so many firms about this, and it's an acceptable conversation. It's not something, taboo. If you're struggling internally, then you can't say it. You can't talk about it. And the awareness of the firms as well, that it's true. It's happening. Like, we've always been overworked in accounting. Like they're really, I mean, yes, this has been a crazy time, but there was more like, well, I went through it, so you're going to go through it thing, versus now this compassion to make sure that you save good people in the firm and you're giving people space for the things that they need to do personally
Yes.
to re-energize. It's a whole new mindset coming through because of this, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Because, really, when we talk about gratitude and opening up yourself for more compassion for others and yourself, if you don't take time for yourself, it's very hard to re-energize to do the work that you do. And that conversation has traditionally been really hard to have, especially at a staff level with a manager, to say, you know what, like, this is the time I go to my aerobics class, or this is the time I go to play basketball. But instead, people were afraid to speak up because then they thought their career would be harmed. And now those conversations are more open, like, yeah, go do that. You need to do that so that you can be refueled for the work. So there's just a better understanding, which I think will help the profession overall.
I agree 100% on that. I do think that it's no longer taboo to say I'm burning out, or I'm super fatigued, or I don't feel healthy right now, and I need to, I need the following or whatever. And firms saying, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are you holding up? Those are questions that didn't get asked. It was more like, what are you working on? Or, how much work do you have left? Or, how many client files do you have left to file, or whatever it is. And so I love that. I love that there's so much more sensitivity to it, such more of a willingness. I think one of the positives, and I don't think it's pandemic related, but it's a positive that I would put on our list of positives in the last 12 months, is the whole focus also and emphasis on diversity and inclusion, of course, but the idea of diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of culture, diversity in gender, diversity of sexual orientation, diversity of discipline, like, we don't need to just have all the same diversity by age or level. Firms are really thinking like, man, we have to have, hear from everybody, and
right.
And we can't hear from them if we're not employing them. Like, if they're not here, then, and really super traditional firms and firms, that you might stereotype as not being progressive because they're from the South or something. I have seen such progress in the DE&I space, the discussions and the realness with the partner group. And another kind of taboo thing to talk about is, it's bubbled up, and now it's okay to talk about it. Now, not everybody's comfortable with it, and I get shut down on it sometimes, like, that's just going to cause problems with our partner group because we're not all on the same page, that kind of stuff, and I think, okay, that's why you should talk about it.
Right, exactly.
It's a little bit like covering up a sore that needs to be cleaned, well, I don't want to deal with that right now, but, well, okay, I know where you stand, at least, that you've got this disparity of thought and you're unwilling to engage it, but most firms are engaging, or many firms are, and it's encouraging. So I would put that on the list of, we have such a far way to go. So I'm not saying, like, I don't want to be heard like I'm saying, and it's solved, I don't know if it's ever solved, but I think at least now we're talking about it more authentically and transparently and using real language instead of having it be this like bullet on the, why work for us, that didn't mean anything.
Right. Well, and additionally, it's where staff people have an opening to talk about it too. That there's actual avenues for that to happen, which was never happening before.
Yeah.
So as much as, the issue of leadership and what it looks like and what the diversity makeup was, if people were feeling like they weren't being heard, they didn't feel like they could say that. They couldn't, it's a totally different situation now where people can speak up, and it's not like you're going to lose your job if you do.
Yeah. At most places, I agree with that 100%. I want to throw, I have so many more that I want to toss out here, but I want to toss one more, and that's retirement. That's a positive. And I'm getting an echo.
Yeah, I
Do you
hear
hear
it too. Yeah.
It just started, obviously, but I'm gonna try a different mic setting. Anyway, some people are freaking out because people are retiring, maybe putting a notice right now, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we're losing such knowledgeable people and really just even workhorses." In some respects, like maybe they weren't progressive and maybe they weren't the biggest business developer, but dang it, they were moving a lot, and now they're going to leave next year or the year after, and I'm so freaked out, or they're leaving at the end of this year. And I get it. I'm sad to lose some of those folks, but I'm not sad to lose others. And the reason I'm not is because they had a picture of what public accounting was, and it worked for them.
Right.
But it wasn't. They weren't necessarily open to change. They weren't progressive. They weren't necessarily using the technology. They were bypassing e-file or bypassing the scheduling system, or they might have been blocking the changes we need to make. And I've heard a little bit of like nail biting or something from some of the young folks, like, "Oh my gosh, they're going," and I'm like, "This is what the moment we've been waiting for."
Right.
Wait a minute, what are you doing? So I think it's a positive and a possibility. This someday, young man or young woman, someday this will all be yours.
Right.
And you can change the business model, and you can change the pricing model, and you can change the ideal target client, and you can change the way we work, and you can change the partners that you have and the team that you work with and the way that you serve clients. And, you can't change it all overnight. Don't get me wrong. It's not a light switch or you'll break things, but man, there's tons of possibility. And I just keep seeing us inching closer to that place where this next generation, X, Y, and Z, are leading.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited about it,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that because some people are fretting, and I want them to stop and say, wait a minute. The loss of, on one hand, is sad, but the possibility is mammoth.
Yeah.
I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go think over here.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, there's not enough to be said on this, which is a good thing. And if you got anything out of today, you see that once you actually step back and start brainstorming it in just a short amount of time, you can find the positives, which actually changes your energy. So hopefully that's something that you can action this weekend and through your day today, to just start noticing, be aware of what's good around you as well.
For sure. First, and then maybe a little bit of what's not, and get to work on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we love having these opportunities to share with you, and thank you for coming, and thanks for the comments, Emily and Grace. We're grateful for that too. And we'll be here next week. So we'll see you at Leadership Lunch Chat next Friday at 12 noon Eastern. Thanks, everybody.